Welcome to the 2021 candidate interviews. These are one-on-one interviews with each candidate. And Jesse Smith is our first candidate that signed up and picked his time. Jesse, thank you so much.
Happy to be the guinea pig.
So, we're going to kind of do things a little bit different than we did in the one-on-one interviews last year and in the forum. Last year, for the one-on-one interviews, we kept it to an introduction and questions with timed responses and so on. And that's what we did in the forum last week. This is going to be a little bit more conversational and free flowing. If you have questions and you are listening at home, feel free to put them on the Facebook feed, and Jesse and I will both kind of monitor the Facebook feed a little bit as we go and see what we can answer. But I have an entire page of questions. I know. Is
All
that
right.
intimidating or what?
It's exciting.
Okay. So you are a sitting council person in North Kansas City, and how many terms have you served so far?
Now, this is my first term, although with COVID, it feels like I've been on for about a decade.
So you're actually running for your second term.
Correct. Yes, I'm running, hoping that people will reelect me.
Okay. So when you first ran for office and you told your person, whether it's your wife or your best friend, your mom or dad, whoever, the person you go to bounce ideas off of,
Mhm.
what did they say when you told them you were thinking about running for city council?
Hmm. This is a good question, Mindy. Well done. Let's kick it off. So, I talked to my wife, Brooke, and she told me that she thought I would be good at it, but she's also not a very public person. So, she worried about what attention that might draw. And fortunately, it hasn't been, people aren't like keeping coals on my head. Every now and then, we'll have somebody stop by our porch while we're out, hanging out and say, hey. So it has made me a little bit more of a public figure, but it hasn't been a burden at all. So that was really the only concern. Otherwise, she was very supportive. We've got some great pictures from when election day happened. She was extremely pregnant. Ella was born a couple weeks after I was sworn in, so it was a very busy time around the Smith household.
I imagine so. So when you told her that you were going to do it again, what was her reaction?
She's all in.
All in.
It's been a good ride, and we've done some good work, and there's a lot of projects that are in process that we want to see through. So she's definitely into it, and she keeps me leveled on this kind of stuff. So if I every time I have an idea or some thought, I run it by her, and she says, yeah, that's either good or maybe you want to tweak this a little bit. So it's great to have that sounding board.
Amen to that. So when you decided to run for office, what really propelled that decision?
So I moved to North Kansas City in 2013, and I think I've made this pretty public that intended to hate it here in the Midwest and get out as soon as I possibly could. I had like a 3-year plan to get back to the Southeast, which is where I'm from, and here we are 8 years later. I'm all in, and I think the tipping point came a couple years in when I really locked in and said I'm gonna put roots down here. So once I decided to put roots down, I made a concerted effort to get to know folks in the neighborhood. I started hosting a bourbon night at my house where just some guys around the neighborhood would come, and we'd have a glass of bourbon and talk about what we liked and what we disliked and our families, and it kind of skewed into, what do we like about North Kansas City? What are we seeing that's a problem? What do we think is great? What can we do better? And and then Councilman DeLong started coming to that. Councilmember Clevenger came to that a couple times, and so I started to get to know these guys, and I'm like, they're kind of like me. It's nice to have people involved who you can just have a conversation with. And so we talked a little bit, and I started thinking more about it, and little while later, I decided, let's do this. I'm going to be here a long time. My family's going to live here a long time, and I'd like to have a say in how things go. And I feel like I'm a good person to get to know all my neighbors. I've made some great relationships with people down the street, especially folks at the Gardens Apartments. They're some of my really good friends, and I miss them dearly since COVID has kept us apart. So it's been great, and that was what propelled me. Is I know I'm going to be here. I want the roots to run deep, and I want to help everybody else get their voice heard too.
So, as you have navigated this last year, you kind of brought up the pandemic. So, we're going to jump in right there. What did the pandemic teach you about leadership?
Oh boy, so much. So I learned first and foremost how important it is for the leaders in the city to be communicating and to get on the same page, and how troubling it can be when we're not. For ourselves, for our own functioning, and then for the citizens at large, it's not great to have split votes on things as important as stay-at-home orders and some discontent there. Sometimes that's how it works, but it's really taught me that we had a lot of decisions to make, and a lot of heavy decisions that I didn't expect. When I started running, I was running in April of 2019. The biggest issue we had to discuss was parking occasionally, and so maybe some developments that might be coming up in a grocery store. And then all of a sudden, we're in a global pandemic, and people are looking to us to make actual decisions that impact people's lives, and to do it in a way that had a measure of grace, but also said, like, this is the way it's going to be. So setting up things like mask orders, there's a lot of pushback from that. And it taught me how, I can make a decision that seems like, I'm making a call. It's that easy. Like, wear a mask. That's it, period. And that was my attitude going in. And then I spoke with some of these business owners who, their livelihoods are going to be impacted by, like, gym owners. I spent a lot of time on the phone with some local gym owners who were pretty upset, and that's understandable. So it made me take a step back and say, okay, there are other perspectives. Now we did proceed with the mask order as it was, but I had to really listen and really understand what people were going to be going through and how my decisions as a city leader would impact them directly.
Tough times to be in leadership for sure. And, we've never had to deal with anything like this ever in history. So lots of learning for everyone.
Yeah, I could really do some precedented times here in the next little bit. Some things where we can look back and say, what did they do in the past with this? Not have to look all the way back to 18 when the last time they dealt with a pandemic. So looking forward to maybe some more life as usual.
Sidebar, the pandemic of 1918, do you know what virus that was?
It I want to say it was an H1N1 virus, but I'm
It
not certain.
it was. It was the
Okay.
first time we saw H1N1 in history. So the good news is that when H1N1 came around again, we learned a lot from it and we knew kind of what to do. So hopefully we'll know what to do the next time a COVID virus comes around.
Hopefully it's a long time off.
Let's hope. So North Kansas City is over 100 years old. And when you think about the history of North Kansas City, what is one thing that you would like to preserve as we move further into the next 100 years?
That's another really great question. What people really tend to love about North Kansas City, and what I hear, especially when it comes to development discussions, is this kind of small town feel that the city has. And I know, or I believe, that this city came about as kind of a railroad town, with the Burlington Railroad. I don't remember if it was called that at that point, and then it developed. The residential side developed around supporting the industrial and the railroad aspect. But I'd imagine, going all the way back, that it had a pretty small town feel. Like, these people were living near each other, they were kind of working together. And I want to keep the small town feel in North Kansas City, and that seems counterintuitive to approving these large apartment developments. But I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. I think we can still be very neighborly with each other. We can still have these walkable streets, which Ella, my daughter, and I are out pounding the pavement nearly every day, especially when it's nice, just walking around. We love the neighborhood feel and the character. So I don't want to lose that by any means. So the decision we make, especially with new developments, are with that in mind. And then we can build on that. We can, we have the industrial character of the city, and that brings in a great deal of tax revenue. Definitely want to keep those businesses supported and feeling welcome in Northtown. So, there's been also kind of a us against them, residents versus businesses. And, and I've spoken to that at council meetings before when businesses came in, a large group of them were angry about bike lanes coming through their portion of town. So I took the initiative to go with one of the large business owners to ride around and see how is this actually going to impact the business environment in the industrial section of town. And it changed the way I thought about it. So keeping the small town feel and the industrial backbone of the city, both are important, and they can both, be accomplished together.
And does that mean you're thinking architecture and as well as kind of the layout?
Yeah. So with for example, with the neighborhood, I love the look and feel of it, but there are some houses that are not looking so great right now. And I think there are things we can do, programs, incentives we can put in place that will help bring that along. And sort of the market as it is right now is encouraging that by default. So, people are starting to, redo these homes, and the neighborhood, particularly in the avenues and some in the traditional North Kansas City neighborhood, are really coming along. And then, through the industrial part, the architecture, the feel, it's a lot of warehouses, some of which will age out. They'll no longer be modern enough to support what needs to be done. So whether they continue as manufacturing or continue as heavy industrial, that'll be up to the owners of those buildings largely. But if they do decide to sell or decide to move on to another use, I would support a redevelopment move through that part of town too. So there's a lot in play, but most of it's going to hinge on the private ownership, and the government of the city can just encourage. Like, we can suggest and encourage and incentivize, but we're not going to tell them what to do with their properties.
When you think about the future of North Kansas City, what makes you most excited?
Hmm. Wow, there's a lot to be excited about. I'm really excited that the rabbit hole is supposed to be opening up here in not too distant future. I know my daughter is going to go just bananas for that. She loves to read, and to see the books come to life. I'm so excited to see that happening. I'm loving what I'm seeing with the 18th Avenue district, the entertainment area where we've got Chicken and Pickle, we've got Repeal 18, we've got some legacy businesses like Paul and Jack's, we've got I don't really go to Neon Wild, but some people do, and then we've got Cinder Block. So and the Mexican restaurant that's coming in. There's a lot of good going on. FM music is there, so some retail. I love what I'm seeing there, and then I'm also excited to see what we're able to accomplish with this bike master plan, because North Kansas City has the asset of being flat as a pancake, right? So if anybody else rides bikes like I ride bikes, I don't ride hills. I stay away from them as much as I possibly can. So North Kansas City is perfect for that. So as we go with this, we'll see downtown get refreshed. The Armor Road, the very controversial bike lanes will make more sense in the context of a larger master plan so that people can be biking around the city, hopefully under 35 with some work with MoDOT, up to 14th. I mean, we're going to see a larger expansion. And then down the road, streetcar potential, light rail. I mean, the possibilities are endless. We're so close to downtown that, it's almost a travesty that we don't have, haven't taken more advantage of our proximity. So we're so well situated to see all of this get connected and make it very easy to move about. You're going to see, a lot more exciting businesses coming in. The residential interest is very much here, but as those get built out, you're going to see more businesses pursue the new resident base. So it's just an exciting time to be here.
It is. So, if I can paraphrase, what you're most excited about right now is the rabbit hole.
Oh,
So,
well, I mean, that was the first thing that popped into my head. I
so
am
what are
very
you
excited. I
most,
think
you personally, what are you most excited about?
No, I'm excited about just the potential for what all we're going to get, all the new things coming in, and the growth of the existing businesses. But the rabbit hole, very exciting. I think I'm just honing what my daughter would say there if she knew what the rabbit hole was.
That's what we parents do. So the redesign of Armour Road had lots going on and was a hot topic, still is a hot topic to some extent.
Hmm.
Looking back, what would you do differently? What would you do differently for future projects that might alleviate some of that discontent?
Yeah, so there's been a lot. I think a lot of lessons learned with the Armor Road process. Now, I wasn't engaged in the process at the time Armor Road was being planned or discussed. I was kind of still fighting not to be here anymore. So I didn't take part in the pop ups and the feedback sessions. So I don't know exactly what those look like. But from what when I've reviewed the tape, it does look like the city made efforts to reach out. We did. Community development did some mini parklets on Armor Road to kind of stake off and show what this could look like. There was some feedback through the Parks and Rec department to do bike. Are you interested in bike lanes? Are you interested in biking around? There were some surveys, some maps where people could put dots on them. And then there was also discussion with engineers about how the road would function. Now, all of this was done through a committee of advisory group. So there were business owners, there were council people, there were residents on this advisory board, and everyone funneled this all back to city council, who unanimously approved Armor Road. And at the very part that it was finally approved, right before pavement started moving, I joined the council. So that's where I came into the picture, and it became very apparent very quickly that some people who voted to approve hadn't fully understood what they were voting for. So that's lesson one. And I very much emphasized council people reading everything. So when somebody on the council is given a document to read, you can't just read the staff memo. You got to read the document. You got to look at the engineering drawings. So when I said in the forum that I feel like I've raised the standard for preparation, I don't think anything like that's going to get by the current council, or I would have words with those people who were asleep at the switch. That's something that is imperative. We as council people have to be aware of what's going on in our city. It's inexcusable to say I didn't get it. I missed that part, and we get a lot of information. So that's lesson one. Lesson two is we need to work to find methods of communication that reach people where they are. Right. So one of the big complaints was we did bike workshops. The city did bike workshops. So, of course, it's going to draw people who are pro bike infrastructure. It's kind of a self selection process. And it's also unlikely that somebody's going to show up to a workshop or a bike master plan or an Armor Road discussion to say, I'm neutral on the road. I don't really care if you do anything or not. Like, people don't come out to say that they don't care. It's kind of like nobody leaves a 3-star review on Amazon. They're either really for it or really against it. So we need to find a way to reach those middle ground people, whether it's through some surveys or some council people reaching out. On the flip side of that, residents, just like council people, have the obligation to be informed. So if the information is out there and people aren't seeing it, some of that onus is going to be on them. So it's a shared responsibility. So people, citizens need to be engaged. City needs to make sure that the information is out there. Find. And then after the fact, so I've been a very big defender of Armor Road to the point where I stopped the move that was going to tear it out in, I guess it was September of last year, just to give it some cooling off and breathing time. And so the lesson that taught me is that knee jerk reactions are bad, right? If we are going to implement a major development plan, say the Burlington corridor, right? We're going to, for the next few years, Burlington is going to be getting refreshed, and downtown will see a similar refresh. We can't immediately say, like, I don't like these aspects of it, get rid of it. We need to give it time to breathe. And I think that's what's happened with Armor is people have let it breathe. Now we had a list of 7 items or 8 items that we're going to go back, and we fixed a couple. We did the parking at the post office. So it's going to be just an iterative process with each of these things. There's going to be things that don't work like we drew them up. Everything looks good on paper until it's, the pavement actually moves and like, could have done that a little differently. And then we fix it. And going forward, we learn and fix the next thing. So I think those are going to be big things. And then final piece of it is communicating the full intent, right? So Armour Road is 3 blocks of redevelopment right now. And from the response we got, you'd think it was the entire city, all the pavement got ripped up and relaid. This is part of a long-term plan to extend downtown, to tie into a multimodal network of transport. But none of that, most of that gets lost in the bike lane argument, right? It's all about the bike lanes on social media. Each post comes up and it's a lot of bike lane talk. But some of the intent was to, yes, create lanes for multimodal transit, but some of it was just to slow traffic coming through downtown, to discourage people who were just commuting through, to really focus on downtown. So communicating all of the intent of the project from the outset, and then continuing to communicate that as it goes.
I think that's a really important point because, from my perspective, um, it was a situation of, oh, they're going to put in bike lanes. Fantastic. I agree with bike lanes. My husband used to ride 300 miles or more a week. So
Right.
he was hit by a Silverado truck while on his bicycle in a residential area at one point. So bike lanes, when we heard bike lanes, we're like, cool, we're in support of it. So we didn't feel like we needed to go to those meetings. And if they had said, oh, we're redesigning Armour Road to put in bike lanes, now that I might have paid a little bit more attention to. So that clear communication you're talking about, I think you hit the nail on the head on what could be done differently, is that clear communication.
Right. And trying, A/B testing different messaging, trying different ways that same thing, we're going to put in bike lanes, or we're going to redesign the road, or we're going to put it out there in multiple different ways on different platforms so that people engage with it in, the meaningful way that they see it.
So, given that experience and that you came right in the middle of everything that was going on, how will you foster independent thinking within the council and with the community? Because you and I both know that conflict isn't always bad. Conflict with resolution is actually very productive. So, how will you keep fostering the independent thought processes and contributions while garnering cooperation and collaboration from all those that need to be at the table?
Sure. So it's easy and increasingly in today's polarized political climate and polarized world to kind of go down your path and put on blinders and hear nothing else. Just lock it in, and anybody who disagrees with you is either stupid, corrupt, or evil, and just write it off. And so I've really focused on not doing that. Listening to people who have completely different opinions or different worldviews from me. It's not easy. It's not something that I can nod along, but in the back of my head, the dialogue saying like, gosh, that doesn't make any sense. Why is somebody saying that? But then to turn that off and say, okay, this person means well. They're really expressing something that's important to them. How can I tie that into the way I think about things, and where can we reach either an agreement or an understanding? We don't have to compromise on this. Like, we can reach a different, like, somebody can tell me something, or I can have a stance, and that could be dead wrong. Like, I could be wrong, they could be wrong, bless you. And we could agree to disagree, or we could find a compromise, a collaboration. There are definitely disagreements on the council right now. You can see it in the votes. Last 2 meetings back, we had 2 votes that either went 5-3 or 4-4, and that's okay, right? We all had differing views on the 18th and Swift development. We'll have differing views on the next development, and that's all right. But as we talk about it, new ideas emerge, and that's really where the discussion is important among the council. Then bringing in the resident perspective, like I've mentioned before, I've got an email that I send out to all people in my ward who are willing to have it. I'm also on the Facebook group, North Kansas City Neighbors. I'm engaging there with people. And sometimes it can come across as me being defensive of a stance we've already taken. And sometimes I'm actually being defensive of a stance we took because there's a lot of research that went into it. And I am checking how I respond on some of those so that people don't think I'm just going to shoot them down. I want to hear what the thoughts are. It's tough after the decision's been made to hear the criticism because I would much prefer to hear that before we make the decision. And that's what I'm really trying to push for. I'm putting the agendas out there as much as I can. I'm trying to get ahead of issues so that people can let us know this is their concern. And we can talk about that, whether it's on the record, off the record. I don't care. Like, I want to talk to the people who are engaged in this community. And if you wait until after a decision's been made to air your grievances, there's often not much can be done. Sometimes that ship has just sailed and we're going to deal with the consequences. We can learn for the next time. So I still want to hear from you, but I really I have so much trouble when people come to gripe after the fact and it's not constructive. So if people want to talk to me, my door is open. More metaphorically, don't come to my house right now because COVID still. But call me. My cell phone is out there. My email is out there. That's probably the best way so I can think about what you're saying. Social media is out there. Get a hold of me and engage, whether you're in my ward or not. Right? There's this idea that you can only reach out to your council person. If they ignore you, then the government's not working for you. Send me an email. I'm jdsmith@nkc.org. I will respond.
So as you continue on to finish out your term, or hopefully you get elected. Now, I'm being unbiased. I will say that to everyone because that's only fair. Um, what is the biggest responsibility in the role of council person, whether you win or not? What is the biggest responsibility you think a council person has?
Oof, I don't know if I can go with one specific responsibility. We're the mouthpiece for the residents. I mean, the people who vote for us elect us to represent them, right? So that's if I were to label one goal. But what that means is that we need to be prepared for meetings. We need to be looking at the long term, not just a knee jerk short term reaction. What is best for the city in our minds and in the minds of the residents who elected us and who we ask about things. But what's best for the city in the near term, in the midterm, and in the long term, and really pushing in that direction, fighting against forces that would push us back, market forces, pandemic forces, and then balancing resident and business interests, right? So putting a personal face on the various businesses, whether they're customer facing or they're industrial, realizing that people's livelihoods are tied up in some of these decisions, and to really just do the best we can to keep the balance there.
So, what's the biggest asset that you bring to the table?
Um, hmm. Personally, I have a background in finance and real estate, which is pretty important right now in North Kansas City. So keeping an eye on the real estate developments and the financial aspect of those, as well as we're coming out of a time when our revenues are down, when Harrah's, who we depend on largely for our gaming fund, which funds a lot of our bigger projects, their revenue was down. So keeping a tight eye on the budget, keeping a good eye on how we're spending the money as a good steward of the taxpayer dollars who pay in. And really that's my forte, is understanding and processing bigger financial concepts and real estate matters. But I'm also well suited to discuss things with residents of various backgrounds and various mindsets, worldviews. I really like to talk to people. I'm a consummate extrovert, so if somebody wants to engage with me, I'm happy to have that discussion. So I think I'm a good mix of the nuts and bolts financial side of things versus the softer people side.
What do you think the biggest challenge that North Kansas City is going to face in the next 5 years?
God, I hope it's not another pandemic. That was the biggest challenge we faced in a long time. I think it's going to be keeping that balance, right? Balancing the demand for growth, this overwhelming desire of people to be in North Kansas City, with keeping that small town feel, and it's very difficult to strike that balance well. But we are going to have to grapple with it. It's We're going to see our resident base move up almost 50% with the new development. So, what does that look like? How does that affect our infrastructure? We've already seen some troubling things with our sewer lines and our water supply lines. Those are all very old, kind of back when plumbing was invented. And so we're going to have to make sure that those stay up to date, are replaced as they are needed. And that's not cheap. So keeping the balance between the growth we're seeing and making sure it doesn't negatively impact our culture here and the infrastructure that will support it.
Because what a lot of people don't realize is that to have the things that we need, we have to have the business and the property taxes and all of that revenue coming in so that we can have the things that we need, meaning the turning our water on, we expect that there's going to be water coming out of the faucet. We expect that trash
Right.
is going to get picked up. All of that stuff we need. And then to have the things that we want, those have to be funded as well, but the needs have to come first.
Right. And a lot of this is market based. So the wants are largely market based. The needs, hopefully the market can take care of it, but if not, the government can step in. So with the water, for example, we have a water treatment. But a lot of people don't know this. The waterworks building you see at the north end of town, that does not treat our water. That's Kansas City. It's ironically placed right on the edge of North Kansas City. Our water treatment plant is where Armour dead ends into Burlington, and that's our water treatment plant. So it specifically treats the water in North Kansas City, and it's done a great job for a long time. Cinder Block Brewery moved here, I believe I heard this from Bryce, because of the water quality in North Kansas City. Also, fun location, but they did. They took a flyer, and because the water is so great, but it's aging, and it has aged, and so we're spending. It's a multi-million-dollar project out of the gaming fund to fix our water treatment plant. Not a sexy project. It's not something that people read a lot about or get really pumped up because our water treatment plant's getting a revamp. But these are the kind of things we really have to keep an eye on for our needs. And a lot of that is going to be funded either through the gaming fund with the heritage revenue or through taxes on businesses. And so keeping our sewers up to date, those are coming through sewer fund, water treatment. What else? The roads. I mean, everything has to be paid for. And then the things we want, like the new and exciting businesses, new restaurants in town,
Link
you know,
City.
yeah, yes, those kind of things. Those are going to be a more of a market approach. So, as a grocery store, for example, right? That's the big talking point that has been debated back and forth. The grocery store requires residents. And if you want one of those, you're going to need the resident base to support it. Now, we can talk about pitching them on the I-35 corridor. That's been done. There's forces that I don't even fully understand behind grocery stores, but to bring that in, we need resident base, and that's what some of these developments are pushing toward. That's part of why the master plan was updated to say we want to double the population, not specifically for a grocery store, but for more businesses to be interested, more resident facing retail, restaurant, bars, breweries, fun family things. These are all going to be driven off of how we bring in residents and how we position our city.
Is there anything that we haven't covered at this point that you want people that would be voting for you to know?
Sure. Let's see. So me, I mentioned earlier my background is in finance and real estate. I am an investor here in North Kansas City, so I own a few rental properties, and this has been one of those hotly debated topics about landlords in town, rental versus ownership, and so I bring a unique perspective to that. So I am a landlord. I'm invested in a literal sense in the success of North Kansas City because it does affect my bottom line, but there's been a kind of a rumbling about conflicts of interest, and if I own rental property, how can I be objective when we're talking about how to fix the rental problem with slumlords and people who don't take care of their properties? So I want to be very clear. There's been two specific issues that have come up. One was about accessory dwelling units, and then one is about how do we fix the properties that have been allowed to just kind of deteriorate. And so, one with the accessory dwelling units, that issue came up in my mind long before I was on council because I own a property that I wanted to put an accessory dwelling unit on, and it wasn't part of the code. So I asked the city about it. It didn't end up working out. I never even submitted the application for it. But then, as it came up, as Councilmember DeLong brought up ADUs, I dug deeper into that and learned what the benefits could be to the city. And how that affects pricing for homes, pricing for rentals, and I supported it from a different angle, even after learning that none of my properties would qualify, even if ADUs were approved, and for non-owner occupants, none of mine would qualify for that. So I support it anyway. But during that meeting, people asked about conflict of interest, which is a fair question. I'm a landlord. Would I benefit from approving this? The answer there would have been a straight no. I wouldn't have benefited because none of my properties were in play. But I did ask the city councilor, the city manager, should I recuse myself? Would I be doing the city a disservice by voting on this issue? And both of them told me, as long as you're disclosing your interest, no, you're not in violation. There would be no problem with you discussing or voting on it. And the same thing has come up now that we've talked about rental inspection programs or possibly incentivizing the rehab of properties, city match funding, those kind of things. So one would be the carrot, one would be the stick approach, and a blended approach. So would I be again in a conflict of interest for discussing or voting on that? And I always will seek the city councilor and the city manager's input on that. And I value every bit of this town. I want to hear from the residents. So if they think there's a conflict of interest there, talk to me about it. Just bring it to my attention. I will engage with that. I will ask the questions. So I want to make sure that people don't think that there's any sort of self-serving interest here, because I want what's best for the city. And sometimes what's best for the city may also benefit members of the council. Hopefully it does benefit members of the council and the general public, because we're all neighbors. We all live here. So if something makes home values go up, yes, I'll benefit because I own a home and I own properties here, but so will the residents here. So issues of bigger policy sometimes require that next level of understanding, and I always take it seriously if there's an appearance of any impropriety. So I just wanted to make sure that was on the record.
That's one of the things that with my different roles that I have in the community, when I'm representing Snake Saturday, when I'm representing my business, when I'm representing myself and my family as residents, what is beneficial for one doesn't always benefit the other. And so I'm very deliberate and intentional about what role I'm in, and obnoxiously so. If you've ever seen me at a city council meeting, if you're out there watching, um, because I think it's important that we are very clear. Conflict is always going to happen, especially in a small community like we have. There is going to be a conflict of interest at times. It's, do we have the maturity to be able to really look at all of the sides of an issue and then make a decision or take a position from there. So thank you for that clarification of how you do it and what steps you take, because I think that that is important. Frankly, with the number of residents that we have, it's very possible that our best friend could end up being on one of the boards. They could be one of our business owners. I mean, there's always going to be these perceptions that people have. So taking the time to have the clarity and make your position known is very important. So thank you for that integrity for that.
Sure. And the other thing that's been kind of thrown around, and it's been on social media. Some residents and even candidates have alleged corruption or backroom deals. I can say with utmost certainty that none of that is true at all. So if you hear that, you can ask the question directly to me. That's fine, and I'll tell you, and I'll give you any kind of proof you need that it's not happening. But be careful when you read that, because those are dangerous words, right? The word corruption being thrown around is not acceptable unless it's true and there's actual evidence for it, and I've seen none. So keep an eye on that kind of stuff. And if you have concerns, true concerns, bring them to me, bring them to another council person, bring them to the city. You can do it anonymously. That would be the best path forward, rather than taking to Facebook or whatever mode of social media is at your fingertips. And then there's one other thing that I want to bring up, is that our boards and commissions are very, very important in town. That's something that I think gets just widely overlooked by residents in general, is the importance of boards and commissions. And I'm not going to throw anybody in the bus, but the appointments to boards and commissions haven't been made public recently. Sometimes I don't even know. I believe Councilmember DeLong mentioned in the mayoral forum, like, we as council sometimes don't even know when an opening happens. And so how could the residents possibly know? So that's going to be really important as we look at a new mayor, as we take on a new council. I want to see residents engaged in our city. I want the boards and commissions to look like the residents of our city, and not to just be the first person that the mayor knows and that the council has heard of so that they get approved. I want to cast as wide a net as possible. And I think we've got some great people on our boards and commission. Our parks board does great work. They're wonderful, devoted people. We've got library board. We've got, I don't want to go through and name all of them because I'll invariably leave one off that is super important. But I want to see more engagement in that, because that's how citizens can take a direct role in what happens in our town, other than being on the council. So if you're watching this, the 8 of you that are on right now, or people who watch it back, look at what's available out there. Put it in an application at City Hall. I really believe that the next mayor, whoever it is going to take that seriously, and the council is going to be really serious about how these boards and commissions operate.
And that's a good point. By state law, the mayor gets to appoint people to boards and commissions, and then the council basically approves them or disapproves them. But essentially, it comes down to the mayor does those appointments. If you want your name in the ring, then you have to fill out the application and make it known. And with the two candidates that we have that are running for mayor, they both at different times have said that they will make sure that they're looking through the applications and considering them. So I just want everybody out there to know how that by state law, that's what one of the things that the mayor gets to do. That it's not.
And I've when I came on the council, I was not clear on that process, and we had a couple appointments that we didn't get any information as the council on at all. Some were renewals, some were new selections, but we got nothing, just a name, and we were supposed to approve that name or not. And taking my role seriously, I started asking questions, and I got a couple like, that's not how we do it here, or the mayor gets to pick, we don't ask questions. Well, certainly we should ask the questions. Are these people qualified? Was there any kind of solicitation out there? So now we get an application, we get the resume that's attached, so we can look through and see, is this person a good fit? And I believe that both mayoral candidates will take the time to reach out, for example, to the parks director. If they want to reappoint somebody, how have they been as a board member? And so as we've gone through this, there have been some contentious votes on selections, which I don't think ever happened in the past. And that's good. That's the kind of conflict that's important to move change forward. So people, and trust me, this council, hopefully the next council, will not be just rubber stamping appointments. We're going to be looking in, making sure, and taking our role seriously.
Lots of changes coming to North Kansas City, but a lot of growth that has happened in those changes, because you're right, we've been a small town, and it's gosh, in the 30 years that I've been affiliated with North Kansas City in some way, it has been a lot of people that we've known forever. And with the doubling in size, or almost doubling in size of population, we're going to see some of those changes. And so ironing out some of these things and educating people on these processes is a huge part of it. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do the forum, is I really wanted voters, whether they are in your ward or anywhere else in the city, to really get to know who's on the council. I
Right.
Because that determines, do I want to run for council at some point? If I'm looking to buy a new home, do I want to stay in the ward that I'm in, or do I want to move to a different ward? I mean, there's a lot of things that happen. Um, do I want to open up a business in North Kansas City? And all of those take the input and are impacted by all of the city council members, not just the ones in the ward I live in.
Right. We represent, I mean, we're not Kansas City, Missouri, right? Like, I don't have in my ward, I'm not certain on the actual split of residents, give or take 1,500 people, maybe 1,000, but I represent the city. I represent the residents. I represent the business owners. So I get calls from business owners, honestly, more often than residents. And I talk to all of them. So we as council people represent all of you, regardless of ward. So it's best to pay attention. It's on you if you're not. Just like if you don't vote in a national election, I don't want to hear you gripe about the person who won. If you're not engaged in local happenings, this is the easiest place to engage. We are a city that is so small. You can walk into City Hall and talk to the city manager. He may not love that I said that, but you can. You can walk in and talk to anybody at City Hall. Wear a mask, and you can't do that in most other cities. We are very uniquely situated to have that sort of availability.
That is true. So, last question. Are you ready? It's a doozy. 3 favorite things about North Kansas City that you have not already mentioned.
3 favorite things. Oof. Wow. Okay. Fortunately, I haven't talked about the parks yet. I love the parks we have here. I talked about the parks board. The parks are one of our crown jewels. We have Mackin Park, we have Dag Park, we've got Wagon Tails Dog Park, and we've got a couple other miscellaneous sprinkled through. I love Mackin. The Parks Department has done such a great job with that park. We're going to see, hopefully, we're going to see a diamond refresh on the baseball diamond. I'm in a softball league there, and it's so well run. And then in a Dag Park, my daughter just adores it. She also likes Wagon Tails Dog Park, even though we don't have a dog. She likes to go watch them run around. The parks are wonderful, top notch. Second piece, our food and dining and entertainment options. Mindy, you're well documented because I've asked the question, what do you think about what's your favorite meal? And you're like, gosh, here's 31 of them. Like, there's so many good eats around town, and I'll off the cuff list a few of my favorites. I love the Iron District simply on concept. It's a revolving door of different things. I love the Iron District. Such a cool spot. Tay's Burger Shack, hard to miss. Come from out of town, grab you a burger. Love it. Hog Jaw Barbecue, so good. The stock sandwiches, the just brisket sandwich, wonderful. And then Hawaiian Bros has come in and just rocked it. I mean, they're perpetually busy. My wife and I have spent an embarrassing amount of money there. And then, of course, Chicken and Pickle can't go without mentioning what they've done here in the area. Love getting in those pickleball leagues. Their chicken salad sandwich is extremely underrated. And then let's see, number 3. Gosh, I've talked about so many things about the city, but I got to come back to that we are such a unique city, that you can literally call up a council person, or you can speak directly to city officials, city manager, the assistant city manager. If you really want to go talk to somebody at City Hall, talk to Kim Nakahoto. She will just love that you came by to say hi. But that you can know everybody, you can know your business owners, you can know them. Oh, the Brookery. Sorry. The Brookery is so good. I was thinking about the people I know by first name. They're wonderful people and wonderful products. So, but I can walk into any given business and know the people by first name. And you don't get that anywhere else. So the small town aspect of it, wonderful.
Okay, I will admit I'm a little disappointed that you didn't mention Snake Saturday in there, but okay, it'll be fine. It'll be
Well,
fine.
it's Snake, Mindy. Yeah, I love that Snake Saturday. We didn't have it this year. It'll be in October, and then I can tell you how much I love it again. I do enjoy a good green beer on Snake Saturday. It's hard to argue with that.
Thank you, Jesse. I hope that this allowed the residents of North Kansas City to get to know you a little bit better as a neighbor, as a council person, not just on, hey, what hot topic do we want to talk about and get your position on, but really having them get to know you if they haven't had a chance to sit down and have a one-on-one conversation with you. I wanted them to actually get to know you a little bit better. And hopefully this was beneficial to you. Um, April 6th is
I'm
the
actually,
election. Go ahead.
if we got another minute or two, I'm
Sure.
seeing some questions in the chat that I would love to address,
Go
if
ahead.
that's all right. So Lois K, I believe it's K Hedrick, mentioned the ADU issue that we had talked about earlier. So her comment, for people watching, says that the ADU issue that you didn't recuse on was a vote to remove the owner occupancy requirement of ADU rental properties. If it would have been approved, you could have benefited. So I understand that perspective. And yes, we were voting to remove the owner occupancy. So the perception was that I, as a landlord, would then have been able to build ADUs at my rental properties. But the point I was trying to make is that my properties, had we removed the owner occupancy requirement, would still not have been allowed. They don't meet the code requirements. So I don't have the parking at two of them, and then two are multifamily, so I couldn't build in a multifamily zone. So that's the point I was making, is that even if we removed the owner occupancy, wouldn't have benefited me at all as a landlord. So I wanted to speak to that. And then J. Tyler Anderson said, hearing the idea of our parks come up, has there ever been discussion of a basketball court near or in Mackin? I know the Y has one, but it's obviously not public. That's another great question. I know that the Parks Board has talked about it in the past. I don't know specifically. And Jay Tyler Anderson, you can just look right above in the chat. Valerie Swearingen is on the Parks Board, so you might reach out to her and find out a little more detail on that, because the Parks Board operates slightly independent from the city. But I think the basketball court in Mackin has come up a number of times. It hasn't. It may have been there in the past and then was taken out. I don't know the history of that, but I'm in support of it. But it takes a Parks Board decision to do something like that. There are other courts, like you mentioned, at the YMCA. That's inside. You kind of have to be a member for that. And then there's one in the church parking lot at 21st and Iron. If people want to play ball, I know that the church allows that. Just don't stay out there too late. I've heard some residents that say that the games rage on late in the evening, so be respectful of your neighbors. But yes, I would be happy to have that discussion, or at least I think the Parks Board is hearing it right now. So hopefully that'll get addressed.
Thank you for catching that there was a couple more questions there. When I looked the last time, it said that there was four, and then you mentioned it, and then suddenly the seven showed up. So
Yeah,
I didn't catch it. Thank you for catching that. Um,
not a problem.
April 6th is the election. General municipal elections, as I've said before, are generally the least attended by voters, but have the greatest impact on our day to day lives in our community. So I encourage you to get out there and vote at the YMCA. I think we're getting ready to have a visitor. Yes, we are. Hello. Can you wave to everybody?
Hi.
Yay! There's her smile. The
So,
YMCA is our voting location in North Kansas City, and we want to make sure that you get out on April 6th. I believe that this week is the last week to get your absentee ballot if you can't go in person. Um, Maybe the 25th is the last day, but don't quote me on that. I'll double check that before tomorrow. But we want to make sure that everybody has the ability to get out there and vote. I will tell you, doing it at the YMCA the way that they have single use pens and it's socially distanced. So they definitely have taken the voter experience during this pandemic very seriously. So please consider getting out there and voting on April 6th. Jesse, thank you so much. What is her name?
Ella.
Hi,
Say
Ella.
hi, Ella. Hi.
Hello. Jesse, one last time, anything you want to close with?
I think we've covered it. If people want to get in touch with me, like I said, the best way is via email, jdsmith@nkc.org. If you go to jsmith, it'll go to Officer Jason Smith. I've had to apologize, and I probably owe him something for having to funnel all my emails. So jdsmith@nkc.org, or I'm on the NKC Neighbors page. Tag me in a post or comment, and I'll, against my better judgment, will probably respond. So happy to have any conversation.
Thank you so much. And we will be back tomorrow evening with 2 more candidate interviews. And I guess I do want to close with this. The candidate interviews are completely voluntary. No one is getting paid to do this. It's not sponsored by anybody. This is 100% for the edification and education of North Kansas City residents and business owners going into this election. Of course, residents are the only ones that get to vote, but business owners have a stake in this as well. So just want you to know that this is entirely voluntary, and some council members and candidates are more comfortable with the technology and some are less. So if please don't take it negatively if your candidate in your wards, especially some of the ones that are being unopposed, there's varying degrees of is this really necessary for people to get to know me? And neither answer is right or wrong. This is just an opportunity we wanted to make sure every candidate had, and every candidate has been given this opportunity to sign up for a time. Thank you so much, and we will see you tomorrow. Thank you, Jesse and Ella.
Thanks, Mindy.
You're welcome. And